There are moments when life feels like a silent repetition of old stories, as if the same scene were being performed with new characters, but always with the same ending. Many believe this is destiny, but a deeper reading reveals something different, an energetic weave that remains active until we learn to observe and dissolve it. The quantum field, this invisible space where information and energy intertwine, offers us a key to understanding why the past insists on projecting itself into the present. Imagine that each experience you've lived has left a record not only in your psychological memory, but also in a kind of subtle fabric that connects thoughts, emotions, and body. When we fail to recognize these records, they become like shadows that influence decisions, attract circumstances, and shape our vision of the future. At the same time, the same quantum field that holds these impressions also offers the possibility of transforming them into new frequencies of creation. The great issue is not to forget the past, but to free ourselves from the way it still governs our choices. This is where consciousness and purpose meet. Consciousness as a beam of light that illuminates hidden patterns, and purpose as the direction that reorganizes energy around a more authentic life. This journey is neither theoretical nor abstract. It can be lived in a practical way, perceptible in both body and mind, revealing a way of existing where the present ceases to be a reflection of yesterday and becomes a creative space, open to what has yet to be born. When we speak of the quantum field, we are not referring to something distant or reserved only for physicists in their laboratories. We are dealing with a dimension that permeates every moment of life, even if most of the time it goes unnoticed. This field can be understood as a matrix of possibilities, a kind of invisible ocean where information and energy coexist in potential state. What we call reality is only the surface of this ocean, the crystallization of certain waves into form and concrete experience. Consciousness, in turn, is the lens through which we choose, consciously or not, which possibilities manifest in our daily lives. One of the most intriguing discoveries of modern physics was the so-called observer effect. In experiments, particles behave differently depending on how they are observed. This suggests that human attention is not passive. It interacts with reality, modulating outcome. Translated into personal experience, this means that the way we think, feel, and perceive events is intimately linked to the way the world responds to us. It's not that we create everything that happens, but the quality of our presence directly influences the field of possibilities around us. Imagine consciousness as a beam of light moving through this field. Where the light shines, something is revealed and gains density. Where there is no attention, the field remains in a latent state, waiting for direction. This is why we often feel trapped in the same patterns. Unconsciously, we keep shining our attention on the same records, repeating choices that reinforce old stories. This dynamic is not punishment, but an opportunity to recognize the power we have to change focus. The science of attention shows us that the human brain possesses remarkable plasticity. Our neural networks are shaped not only by major events, but also by what we repeatedly choose to observe. Each persistent thought, each nurtured emotion, strengthens a neural pathway that becomes more accessible with each repetition. This explains why painful memories or reaction patterns seem so automatic. They have been reinforced countless times, but the same logic applies in reverse. When we direct consciousness toward new ways of interpretation, we create new pathways that gradually become as natural as the old ones. The practical question is, how can we approach the quantum field in an accessible way? One path is to recognize that consciousness is not limited to the thinking mind. It is also expressed in bodily sensations, in the rhythms of breathing, in the way we feel the space around us. The body is like a sensitive seismograph that translates subtle vibrations into physical impulses. By listening to these signals, we learn to recognize when we are repeating old energetic patterns and when we are opening space for something new. There is a curious aspect. Many times we try to understand life only through reasoning, accumulating theories and concepts. But the quantum field does not respond to mental overexertion. It responds to the quality of presence. Being present is not just paying attention, but adopting a stance of curiosity toward the moment without predetermining what it should be. It is in this openness that frequencies different from those we usually carry can manifest. Think of an orchestra. Each instrument represents a possibility of reality, and the quantum field is like the not yet written score, where each note may or may not be chosen. Consciousness is the conductor, determining which sounds will come to life. If the conductor always insists on the same notes, the music becomes repetitive. But if he dares to open space for new combinations, the symphony transforms into something alive and surprising. This understanding opens a new perspective on purpose. Many people believe that purpose is a fixed destiny, a line already drawn that we must simply discover. But from the perspective of the quantum field, purpose is less about finding something ready-made and more about aligning consciousness with frequencies that resonate with the authenticity of who we are. It is an ongoing choice, not a definitive revelation. Each time we change the quality of our attention, we adjust the tuning of what manifests in the field. It is important to emphasize that this process does not mean denying reality or living in fantasies. On the contrary, it requires rare courage to honestly observe what we are actually feeding with our attention. Many times we believe we are open to the new, yet we remain fixed on expectations and inherited narratives. Here lies the first invitation of the quantum field, to recognize that consciousness is not just about seeing what happens, but also perceiving how we are participating in the creation of what we call reality. At its core, the quantum field is not something external, separate from us. It is the very fabric in which we are immersed, a space of constant interdependence. Consciousness not only navigates this field, but is also a constitutive part. When we change our internal state, we adjust the way this fabric organizes itself around us. This understanding brings responsibility, but also immense freedom. We are not condemned to endlessly repeat the scripts of the past. The quantum field offers us the possibility of reconfiguring experience whenever we clearly choose where to rest our attention. Every experience we live does not simply disappear when the moment ends. The body, the mind, and even the spaces around us carry subtle records of everything we have felt, thought, and experienced. These marks are not just psychological memories, but energetic impressions that settle on a deeper level of consciousness. When we speak of energetic memories, we are referring to these invisible layers that shape our responses to the world, even without our awareness. They function like underground currents, silent, yet capable of directing the flow of life. Think of an old house. Even after renovations, new paint, and different furniture, it is still possible to feel a certain weight in the air, as if the atmosphere held on to stories that refuse to vanish. Human beings are no different. Our cells carry emotional echoes, the nervous system registers reactions, and the psyche stores patterns of interpretation. Thus, when a current situation awakens memories of something old, the body reacts as if it were reliving that moment. The past returns not as conscious memory, but as active energy infiltrating the present. Many times, we believe we have overcome an experience simply because we no longer think of it often. But just a word, a gesture, or even a scent in the air is enough for a dormant feeling to resurface with unexpected force. This happens because energetic memory does not depend on logical reasoning. It is rooted in emotional and bodily circuits that activate automatically. The mind may try to control, but the body reveals what has not yet been fully integrated. These memories have no moral character. They are neither good nor bad in themselves. They simply exist as records of experiences, waiting for an eye capable of recognizing their presence. The problem arises when they remain unconscious and turn into filters through which we see reality. Instead of reacting to what is in front of us, we end up responding to echoes of the past, repeating old emotions in new scenarios. It is like wearing tinted lenses. No matter what appears, everything will be colored by the memory still vibrating within us. From the quantum point of view, these energetic impressions work like frequencies that keep resonating until something modifies them. Just as a guitar string, once struck, continues vibrating for a few seconds, our memories keep emitting signals even after the event has ended. And the stronger the emotion tied to the experience, the more lasting the resonance. This explains why traumas or intense joys leave such strong marks. They are waves that continue reverberating in the inner field. The good news is that these memories are not immutable. Unlike a stone engraved with eternal symbols, they behave like clay, moldable in the face of new perception. When we bring consciousness to what was hidden, we create the chance to reorganize the energy associated with the memory. This is where science and spirituality meet. Neuroplasticity and conscious observation provide the basis for understanding that we are not trapped by what we have lived. We can reframe, alter the frequency, dissolve the emotional density that keeps us tied to the past. It is interesting to realize how the body acts as a reliable map of these memories, a recurring tension in the shoulder, an anxiety that arises always in specific contexts, a knot in the stomach in certain situations. All of these may indicate energetic records still asking for attention. Instead of ignoring or merely fighting the symptoms, we can learn to listen to them as messages. The body does not lie. It clearly expresses what the mind tries to disguise. There are also memories subtly transmitted across generations. Studies in epigenetics suggest that intense experiences of parents and grandparents can leave chemical marks on DNA, influencing how descendants react to certain stimuli. In the quantum field, this means that we carry not only our own impressions, but also inherited frequencies from those who came before us. These energetic inheritances, when unrecognized, can lead us to repeat patterns we do not understand the origin of. Yet the weight is not a definitive destiny. Conscious recognition paves the way for transformation, breaking invisible chains that cross entire families. Recognizing the existence of these energetic memories does not mean being imprisoned by them. On the contrary, it is the first step toward regaining freedom. When we identify that certain reactions do not belong to the present, but are responses to old records, the possibility of choice arises. This choice does not erase the memory, but changes the way it affects us. An emotion that once dominated us becomes just a signal, a reminder of something that needs more attentive care. This process requires delicacy. Many people try to force forgetfulness or suppress feelings, believing that this is enough to move on. But the quantum field does not respond to repression, it responds to integration. It is in the act of welcoming, observing, and giving new meanings that energy reorganizes itself. Just as music dissolves in the air when another melody begins to play, old memories give way when new frequencies are introduced by consciousness. The understanding of energetic memories invites us to look at ourselves with more patience. Instead of seeing life's repetitions as failures or mistakes, we can understand them as signs that there are still records asking for light. Each memory is an opportunity for liberation, a portal to transform the past into wisdom rather than prison. As we walk through this territory, the present ceases to be contaminated by invisible echoes and begins to open as a fertile space, capable of receiving new ways of existing. Those who observe their own life closely, sooner or later, notice a strange repetition. Places change, faces change, even the goals we believe we pursue change, but the central plot always seems to return. It is as if we were trapped on an invisible wheel that insists on turning, bringing back situations in different guises, but with the same essence. These cycles are not a coincidence. They are manifestations of unconscious patterns that, until they become visible, continue to guide our choices without our full awareness. A simple example can be seen in romantic relationships. How many times does someone find themselves involved in different stories that always end in abandonment, in distrust, or in silence? It is not merely a matter of bad luck or poor judgment. There is an inner programming made of energetic memories, beliefs, and automatic responses that shapes the kind of experience that repeats. The conscious mind may desire something new, but the energetic field, laden with old records, tends to reproduce what is already familiar. Familiarity, even when painful, exerts enormous power. The unconscious prefers the known to the unknown, even if that known brings suffering. It is like a river that has already carved a deep bed. The water always finds it easier to follow the same path than to create a new one. In the same way, emotions and thoughts, already repeated many times, run more smoothly, becoming the invisible script of experiences. The result is that we remain circling in the same orbit, without realizing that we ourselves are responsible for feeding this gravity. From the point of view of quantum physics, this can be compared to a repetitive collapse of possibilities. Among the infinite realities available in the field, we end up, without realizing it, always choosing the same ones, because consciousness remains tuned to old frequencies. With each choice, we reinforce the same pattern, like a record player's needle that always falls into the same groove on a disc. There is no punishment in this process, only a mirror. The field returns with precision what we still vibrate unconsciously. What is curious is that these cycles tend to intensify until we become aware of them. It is as if life turned up the volume of repetition so that we can finally hear the message. A difficulty that once appeared subtly begins to manifest more evidently. Relationships become more conflictual, obstacles repeat in different contexts, and the feeling of frustration accumulates. This increase in intensity is not punishment, but a call. Life insists on showing what still needs to be seen and transformed. Breaking repetitive cycles does not mean fighting against them. The struggle only reinforces the focus on the same pattern. The real key lies in observation. When we are able to see clearly that a situation is not just an isolated event, but part of a recurring plot, something already begins to dissolve. Consciousness illuminates what was previously shadow, and the simple act of perceiving alters the energetic dynamics that kept the cycle in motion. But it is also necessary to recognize that this observation requires courage. Facing unconscious patterns often confronts us with aspects of ourselves we would rather ignore. It is uncomfortable to admit that, to some extent, we are co-authors of the experiences that most bother us. However, by assuming this responsibility, we regain a power that was hidden. We cease to be victims of circumstances and become active participants in the transformation process. Contemporary psychology speaks of complexes and compulsive repetitions. Spiritual traditions speak of karma or unlearned lessons. The quantum field, by uniting science and spirituality, shows that all these concepts point to the same reality: unconscious patterns that continue to generate experiences until they are re-signified. And this need not be seen as a burden. Each repetitive cycle carries latent wisdom, a specific learning that presents itself again and again until it is integrated. The first step, therefore, is to bring to light what was hidden. When we recognize that a given situation is not just the product of chance, but the repetition of a pattern, we are no longer entirely at its mercy. Repetition loses part of its strength when it is named, when we stop reacting automatically and begin to observe what is happening. This pause creates space for new choices, for paths not yet taken in the field of possibilities. It is possible that, at first, even after noticing the cycle, the repetition still occurs. This should not be seen as failure, but as part of the process of change. Old patterns have inertia, and it takes time for new frequencies to consolidate. The important thing is to note that each time we consciously choose to respond differently, even in small ways, the inner field begins to reorganize. Little by little, the river carves a new bed, and the current of energy finds another path to flow. At bottom, repetitive cycles are disguised invitations. They ask us to wake up from autopilot and assume the role of co-creators of our own reality. While we remain unconscious, we are carried by the wheel. When we awaken, we realize that the wheel is not a prison, but an opportunity for evolution. The quantum field then reveals that the past does not have to repeat itself indefinitely. There is always a point of choice, and each moment can be the opening to interrupt the cycle and inaugurate a new way of living. Among all the tools we possess to transform life, few are as powerful as conscious observation. Unlike simply looking or paying superficial attention, this kind of observation is an inner posture in which the observer does not seek to control, judge, or immediately correct what he perceives. He places himself before his own experience like a curious scientist, willing to record internal and external movements without being carried away by them. It is precisely in this attitude of attentive presence that a change occurs in the quantum field. By observing without attachment, we begin to modify the frequency that was previously repeated automatically. The paradox of conscious observation is that, contrary to what one might imagine, it does not require intense effort. It is not about policing every thought or measuring every emotion, but about opening a space of expanded perception. It is like turning on a soft light in a dark room. There is no need to run to rearrange the furniture. It is enough to illuminate to see what has always been there. This simple change already transforms the relationship with one's own pattern. What was previously invisible, and therefore controlling, becomes visible and subject to choice. At the physiological level, this practice directly impacts the nervous system. When we observe without judgment, the body tends to reduce its fight or flight response. Breathing becomes deeper, heartbeats find a more stable rhythm, and the brain begins to function in states that favor clarity and creativity. It is no coincidence that age-old contemplative traditions have dedicated themselves to cultivating this state of relaxed attention. It is in it that the inner field finds coherence, and coherence in turn reorganizes the information that vibrates around us. Many times we confuse observation with analysis. Analysis is a mental operation based on concepts and comparisons. Conscious observation, however, comes before any interpretation. It is the ability to notice a thought arising without immediately believing it, to feel an emotion emerging without fully identifying with it. This distinction is fundamental. When we analyze, we are trapped in the conditioned mind, which tends to repeat the same judgments. When we observe, we create a healthy distance that allows us to see beyond habit. An everyday example can illustrate this. Imagine someone who always feels diminished in work meetings. The automatic reaction is to tense the body, lower the voice, silently accept the feeling of inferiority. But if, in that moment, the person can consciously observe their own posture, the tension in the shoulders, the short breath, the thoughts of devaluation, something begins to change. Even if externally nothing has transformed, internally there is already a space between experience and reaction. This space is where the possibility of responding differently is born. In the quantum field, this pause has an immediate effect. Instead of collapsing reality toward the usual pattern, we open space for new probabilities. The energy that previously moved almost automatically toward a familiar path finds the chance to reorganize. This is the point at which freedom ceases to be an abstract concept and becomes palpable practice. The freedom not to repeat the same choice, the freedom to allow something new to manifest. It is also important to realize that conscious observation is not limited to moments of crisis or discomfort. It can be cultivated in simple situations, such as feeling the water's temperature during a shower, noticing the sounds of the street without labeling them, or following the breath during a walk. These everyday moments are like silent training sessions, strengthening the muscle of presence so that, in the face of greater challenges, the posture is already available. Just as a musician practices scales to masterfully perform a symphony, we train observation in small things to apply it to big ones. There are, however, subtle pitfalls. One is turning observation into rigid surveillance, demanding from oneself an unattainable perfection. Another is expecting immediate results, as if the simple practice would instantly erase years-old patterns. Conscious observation is not a quick control technique, but a continuous process of opening. Its power lies in constancy, in the gentle repetition that, little by little, re-educates our relationship with life. In the silence born of this practice, we often discover deep layers of ourselves that were covered over. Old memories may surface, forgotten emotions may reappear. Far from being a problem, this movement is a sign that the inner field is being illuminated. Conscious observation does not create these experiences. It only reveals what was already stored. By allowing them to come to the surface without resistance, we give the quantum field the opportunity to reorganize them into new frequencies. This posture teaches us something precious. We do not need to solve everything by force. Observation itself, when sustained with patience and sincerity, is already an agent of transformation. It is as if the energy of old patterns could not remain the same in the face of the light of consciousness. Little by little, they lose rigidity, dissolve, and in their place arises an empty, fertile space, ready to receive something new. At bottom, observing consciously is learning to inhabit the present without intermediaries. It is an act of honesty with oneself, a gesture of courage before what we would rather not see. And paradoxically, It is in this unmasked encounter that we discover the lightness of being. When we can simply be, attentive but not tense, available but not reactive, the quantum field reorganizes around this clarity. The result is not just a moment of peace, but the opening of new possibilities that were previously hidden by the fog of unconscious patterns. One of the greatest personal discoveries we can make is to understand that the memories of the past, no matter how intense, do not need to remain immutable. They are not stone blocks carved once and for all, but rather malleable records, capable of reorganizing when they come into contact with a new perception. This process is what we call quantum resignification, the ability to transform the meaning of previous experiences and, with that, alter the energetic frequency they emit in the present. Each memory holds not only facts, but also emotions and interpretations. Two people can live the same situation and record completely different impressions. This shows that it is not the event itself that determines its strength, but the meaning we attribute to it. When we look at old experiences only through the lens of pain or loss, the energy that continues to reverberate is dense and limiting. But when we reinterpret the same event with another view, the energetic record softens and opens to new possibilities. To resignify is not to deny what happened, nor to create an optimistic fantasy to replace reality. It is an act of courage that involves fully acknowledging what was lived and at the same time allowing that fact to find a new place within us. In quantum terms, it means altering the frequency associated with the memory, changing how it interacts with the field of possibilities. The memory does not disappear, but the charge that kept us bound to it dissolves, freeing energy to be directed towards something creative. A simple example can clarify this. Imagine a person who grew up constantly hearing criticisms about their ability. For years, each attempt to express themselves was accompanied by the fear of making mistakes. The energetic record of this experience generated a pattern of withdrawal. However, when this person observes carefully and decides to resignify, they may realize that those criticisms, though painful, also awakened in them the desire to develop more skill and consistency. The experience ceases to be only a wound and comes to carry a sense of strengthening. It is not that the pain disappears, but it becomes fuel for another direction. This movement is comparable to the work of an art restorer. The old canvas, covered by grime and marks of time, does not need to be discarded. On the contrary, when it is carefully cleaned, it reveals colors and strokes that were hidden. To resignify is to clean the layers of limiting interpretation, to allow the essence of the experience to show itself in its fullness. Often, what seemed to be only suffering reveals itself as a turning point, a lesson, or even a source of compassion. From a neurological point of view, this process is supported by brain plasticity. When we revisit a memory and associate it with new emotions, we create connections different from the original one. The memory that seemed fixed is updated, gaining another effective tone. This is not mere theory. Every time we think about an event, we are recreating the memory in our brain, and at that moment, it becomes vulnerable to transformations. That is, each recollection is also an opportunity for resignification. In the quantum field, this updating resonates as a change in frequency. If before we emitted waves of fear or resentment tied to a certain memory, we begin to emit waves of learning, gratitude, or strength. This change affects not only the inner world, but also the outer one. It is common to notice that, after resignifying experiences, similar situations cease to repeat with the same intensity. The field no longer needs to show us the same lesson again, because the energy has already been reorganized. It is important to remember, however, that resignifying is not a single act done just once. Many memories carry deep layers and may require different views over time. Each new phase of life offers distinct angles that illuminate previously invisible aspects. Thus, resignification is more a continuous path than an endpoint. At each step, we free fragments of energy bound to the past, expanding the inner space to live the present with more authenticity. Perhaps the most liberating point of this process is understanding that we do not need to wait for external circumstances to change in order to transform the inner meaning. Even if the surrounding reality remains the same, the way we relate to it can be profoundly different. This autonomy is a quiet power. We cannot change what happened, but we can choose the narrative we carry from now on. And this choice changes not only the memory, but also the field of possibilities that opens before us. When reflecting on all this, a practical question arises. How can we begin this movement in our daily life? The first step is simple but profound. Be willing to look at old experiences without the immediate intention of erasing them. Simply acknowledging that they are there, that they left marks, already opens the door. Then it is possible to seek a new meaning, not through denial, but through integration. Often it helps to ask, what did this situation teach me that I would not have learned otherwise? What strength was born in me from this episode? These questions do not change the past, but they change the way it remains alive within us. And here comes an invitation for you who are following this reflection. If some old memory came to mind during this reading, choose one that you wish to re-signify and write in the comments what new meaning you would like to give it. It can be a word, a short phrase, something simple but true. This gesture is not just an interaction, but an act of anchoring in the present, a way to begin reorganizing the inner field. And if you feel that this message has touched you, like this content as a sign that you are willing to transform your own story into a frequency of creation. There is a moment in the transformation process when, after recognizing old memories and re-signifying patterns, we come across something unexpected, a blank space. This void, which often causes strangeness or even discomfort, is in fact one of the most fertile states we can experience. It arises when old inner structures lose strength and have not yet been replaced by new forms. It is like a plot of land that, after being cleared, sits quiet awaiting seeds. Many feel fear of this silence because it contains no familiar references, but it is precisely there that the power of the creative void lies. In nature, the void is never absolute absence, it is always possibility. Think of a starry night. The dark sky is not just a lifeless backdrop, but the space that makes it possible to see each star. Without the contrast of the void, there would be no brightness. Likewise, in our lives, the inner space that opens when old memories cease to imprison us is the same that allows new frequencies to enter. The creative void is a field of pure potential, a state in which anything can be born. It is curious to note how we are conditioned to quickly fill any space of silence. If a relationship ends, we soon seek another. If a routine falls apart, we rush to create another immediately. This haste to occupy the void often prevents us from perceiving its richness. The impulse to fill comes from discomfort with uncertainty. However, if we can sustain this space without rushing to conclusions, we allow the quantum field to reveal possibilities that would never arise if we were busy repeating the familiar. The creative void is not apathy, nor passivity. It is a state of expanded listening, where the mind grows quiet and the heart opens to subtler signals. In this space, unexpected ideas can arise like flashes, intuitions find a clear passage, and the body rests from old automatic impulses. Many artists report that their most inspired moments occurred when they allowed themselves not to know what to do, surrendering to this interval between the old. This report applies not only to art. Everyday life can also flourish when we make room for the unexpected. From the quantum point of view, the creative void can be compared to the potential state of particles before they collapse into a specific form. In this state, all possibilities coexist, awaiting the focus of consciousness to manifest. When we remain present in this void, without rushing choices, we give ourselves the chance to access alternatives that were off the usual radar. It is as if, for a few moments, we aligned with the field in its purest form, before our memories and expectations define the contours of what will become reality. This state of openness does not mean complete inaction. It is about cultivating subtle attention, like someone placing their hands on the soil before planting. There is care, there is presence, but there is no anxiety. The void asks for trust. It asks that we trust something new will come, even if we cannot see it yet. It is an invitation to rest in the unknown, to recognize that we do not need to have all the answers now for life to follow its course. It is common, in this process, for resistance to arise. The mind tends to cling to old references, even if they no longer make sense. There may be fear of losing identity, of no longer knowing who we are without the old patterns. However, It is precisely in this letting go that we find our essence. By ceasing to define ourselves exclusively by past experiences, we discover that we are broader than any narrative we have carried. The void, instead of being a threat, reveals itself as a mirror of our true nature. Open space, capable of welcoming infinite forms. A simple exercise can help to understand this state. Imagine a garden after a harvest. The plants that were there have been removed, and now the soil is exposed, quiet, apparently unoccupied. At this moment, any seed that is sown will have the chance to sprout. If the ground remained full of old roots, there would be no space for the new. Likewise, when we accept the inner void, we are preparing the field for seeds more aligned with our purpose. Patience is essential because we do not always immediately see the shoots emerging, but the process is already underway, invisible beneath the surface. Another fundamental aspect is realizing that the creative void cannot be manufactured by willpower. It happens naturally when old patterns are dissolved. What we can do is learn to recognize it and not run from it. This requires deep trust in life, a surrender to the flow of the quantum field. When we understand that the void is an integral part of transformation, we stop fearing it and begin to value it as an indispensable phase in the cycle of renewal. Ultimately, the creative void is the necessary pause between the past and the future. It is in this interval that we become more receptive, more attentive to what truly wishes to be born. Instead of anxiously carrying projects inherited from external expectations, we begin to hear more clearly the inner voice that guides us. And this listening is only possible because we allow ourselves to be in silence, sustaining the space that seems like nothing, but contains everything in potential. Thus, far from being absence, the creative void is fullness in a latent state. It is the matrix where new stories can form, where the quantum field opens into unprecedented possibilities. By learning to inhabit this space, we discover that we do not need to fear it. The void is the blank canvas, the initial breath, the pause between two notes that allows the music to breathe, and it is precisely within it that the future begins to be born. Much is said about purpose as if it were a fixed destiny, a previously drawn goal that each person needs to discover in order to live fully. This view, although inspiring, ends up becoming a trap because it places purpose as something distant, almost unattainable, and generates the feeling that something is always missing. When we look from the quantum field, we perceive a different dimension. Purpose is not a finish line, but a frequency we can tune into in the present. Frequency is a mode of vibrating, a pattern of energy that expresses itself in thoughts, emotions, and actions. Each person, upon coming into deeper contact with themselves, perceives that there is a unique tone that defines them. It is not a specific activity or a social role, but an essential quality that runs through everything we do. This quality is the true purpose, a state of inner coherence that, when cultivated, naturally organizes outward paths. An example can help to clarify. Imagine a person who feels their essence linked to creation and beauty. They might be an artist, a teacher, a therapist, or even an engineer. In any field, their purpose will be expressed whenever they manage to bring beauty and creativity to what they do. Another individual may have clarity as their central frequency, the ability to organize chaos. It does not matter whether they work as a leader, researcher, or caregiver. This frequency will manifest as purpose whenever their presence illuminates what was confused. Thus, purpose is not a profession or task, but the vibration that runs through our choices. This perspective frees us from the relentless search for definitive answers. Instead of asking, "What should I do to fulfill my purpose?" we can ask, "What frequency do I want to sustain today, in this moment?" This change of view brings lightness, because it shifts the idea of purpose from something future to something already available now. The quantum field responds immediately to the frequency we emit, not to distant plans. When we are aligned with our essential vibration, we begin to attract circumstances, people, and opportunities that resonate with that state. It is interesting to note how this alignment changes the feeling of effort. When we act in harmony with our frequency, life seems to flow more naturally. This does not mean the absence of challenges, but a change in how we face them. Obstacles cease to be insurmountable barriers and become experiences that further strengthen our vibration. Purpose's frequency is a source of energy, not of depletion. It renews itself precisely because it is born from within, not from trying to meet external expectations. From a scientific point of view, we can associate this idea with cardiac coherence. Studies show that when we are in states of gratitude, compassion, or clarity, the heart enters a more harmonious rhythm that positively influences the brain and the nervous system. This state of coherence is measurable, and it shows that aligned emotions and intentions produce more stable waves that radiate into the environment. Thus, purpose is not just an abstract idea. It manifests in physical, perceptible signals that reveal harmony between interior and exterior. There is, however, a necessary caution. Purpose, as frequency, is not a magic formula that eliminates all uncertainty. It is more like a compass. Amid life's changes, there may be confusion, paths that seem to close, unexpected situations. The chosen frequency is the reference point that keeps direction even when we do not know exactly which road to take. By remaining faithful to this vibration, we can pass through transitional periods without losing our center. Another fundamental aspect is that purpose's frequency manifests not only in major projects, but also in small, everyday gestures. The way we talk to someone, how we prepare a meal, or how we deal with a setback can express this vibration. When we understand this, we realize that we are never outside our purpose. At most, we are momentarily disconnected from the frequency that is essential to us, and we can always return to it in the present moment. This view also invites us to greater responsibility. If purpose is frequency, it does not merely benefit us individually. Every time we choose to sustain our essential vibration, we radiate that quality to the environment. Inner coherence becomes external influence, contributing to collective balance. The quantum field does not recognize rigid boundaries between me and other. Our waves intertwine. Thus, living in purpose is also offering the world a frequency of harmony and clarity that can resonate in many directions. At bottom, purpose's frequency teaches us that we do not need to search incessantly for something outside ourselves. What we seek is already present as a fundamental note in our own music. The work is not to find this note somewhere distant, but to learn to hear it and tune it consistently. And when we do, the field responds with synchronicities that confirm the alignment. What once seemed like effort becomes flow, and what seemed like emptiness reveals itself as fullness. Living purpose, therefore, is not earning a title or reaching a final destination. It is to sustain daily the vibration that expresses who we truly are. This vibration is quiet but powerful. It is what guides us amid uncertainties, gives us energy to face challenges, and connects us to something greater than ourselves. The moment we realize this, we stop desperately seeking meaning out there and begin to live as a continuous expression of our essence. And it is in this state that life reorganizes itself, not as an arduous task, but as a dance that follows the natural rhythm of what we truly are. There are moments when life seems to speak to us in a silent language, made of unexpected encounters, improbable coincidences, and signs that appear as if they were direct answers to intimate questions. These moments are called synchronicities. Unlike ordinary chance, synchronicity carries meaning, as if the universe were arranging specific circumstances to reflect the inner state of the one experiencing them. In the quantum field, these experiences are not mere coincidences, but manifestations of frequencies that align and attract corresponding expressions in the present. When we are trapped in the past, or disconnected from the present moment, synchronicities tend to go unnoticed. We may even experience meaningful encounters, but they seem accidental, without real value. On the other hand, when we cultivate presence and awareness, we begin to notice how every detail can carry a message. A casual conversation with a stranger may bring exactly the clarity we were seeking. A book falling from a shelf opens to the page that answers an old question. An opportunity arises at the exact moment we finally decide to change our stance toward life. These episodes, when perceived, become living reminders that a greater intelligence is at work. Synchronicity can be understood as a dialogue between consciousness and the quantum field. When we align our thoughts, emotions, and intentions to a coherent frequency, the field responds by organizing external events that mirror that vibration. It is not magic, but resonance. Just as two strings tuned to the same note vibrate together, the frequency we sustain internally finds equivalence in the external world. This resonance is what gives synchronicity its character of deep meaning, of invisible confirmation. A common example occurs when we are reflecting intensely on an important decision. Suddenly, small signs related to the theme appear throughout our day. A phrase in a song, a news headline, a chance conversation. For those who are distracted, these signs seem irrelevant, but for those who are present, they become indicators that life is responding, suggesting paths. It is not about blindly following any coincidence, but about learning to recognize when something resonates so clearly that it cannot be ignored. It is important to understand that synchronicities do not happen to prove theories or feed egos. They are invitations to deepen our connection with the present moment. When we notice an event charged with meaning, we feel called to heightened attention, as if the universe was saying, "Be here, now." Synchronicity does not relieve us of the responsibility of making choices, but reminds us that we are not walking alone. We are always in dialogue with a greater web of relations and possibilities. From a psychological point of view, these experiences reinforce the feeling of belonging and purpose. They work like anchors, reminding us that there is coherence between what we feel inside and what happens outside. From a spiritual point of view, they reveal that life is more than a mechanical sequence of causes and effects. There is a dimension of meaning that cannot be reduced to statistical probabilities. This dimension is the quantum field responding to the quality of our presence. The key to living more synchronicities does not lie in obsessively seeking them, but in cultivating states of sincere attention and inner coherence. The more aligned we are with our essential frequency, the more easily we perceive signs that confirm this alignment. The opposite is also true. When we are disconnected, in states of confusion or unconscious repetition, the field reflects this noise, and life seems fragmented without synchronicity. Synchronicities also invite us to trust the flow of life. Many times we want to control every aspect of the path, but it is precisely in the space between planning and surrender that the most significant signs arise. They show that, as much as we are responsible for our choices, there is a greater dimension guiding the storyline. This trust is not passivity, but a partnership with the field, where our intentions meet the creative intelligence that permeates everything. A fascinating aspect is that synchronicities become more intense during periods of transition. When we are leaving an old cycle and opening to the new, the field seems to reorganize to show us directions. It is as if, by releasing inner space, we opened a clearer channel to receive external confirmations. These moments can bring courage to move forward, for they reveal that we are not walking in the dark, but accompanied by subtle signs that point to the next step. At the core, each synchronicity is a reminder that the present is vaster than we imagine. We are not merely living isolated events, but participating in a network of invisible connections that adjusts according to our vibration. Perceiving this gives us a sense of integration with the whole, a silent certainty that there is order even in apparent chaos. By welcoming these experiences with gratitude, we strengthen even more the frequency that makes them possible. Thus, living attentive to synchronicities is not about seeking extraordinary miracles, but about learning to read the language of the quantum field in everyday life. It is recognizing that life speaks to us through subtle signs, that each moment can carry an answer, and that reality is not rigid, but permeated with resonant meanings. The more present we are, the more we understand that the present is not just time passing, but a living space of constant dialogue between consciousness and the universe. Throughout this journey, we have seen how the quantum field reveals a possible path to free ourselves from the bonds of the past and live with more clarity, presence, and purpose. Every old memory, every unconscious pattern, and every repetition that once seemed to imprison us can be seen not as a definitive sentence, but as raw material for transformation. When we learn to observe consciously, to re-signify, and to sustain frequencies aligned with our essence, the present ceases to be an automatic reflection of yesterday and becomes a creative space, fertile with possibilities. In this space, Emptiness is not absence, but an open field. Purpose is not a distant obligation, but a vibration that manifests now. And synchronicities are living signs that we are in tune with something greater than ourselves. Life thus ceases to be a cycle of blind repetitions and becomes a conscious dance, where each step is both a personal choice and a dialogue with the universe. The past does not disappear, but it loses the power to govern us. The future ceases to be an anxious concern, because the present reveals itself as sufficient and abundant. It is at this point that freedom blossoms, not as an escape from reality, but as the capacity to inhabit each moment with authenticity. If you have come this far, write in the comments the phrase, "I choose to live in the present," so that I know you followed until the end. And if this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and like this video to receive more reflections like this. Your presence and interaction strengthen this space and help to expand this message.